Dehya is finally out, and I really wish I could say in this video that everything is fine with Dehya, but it's not. Some of the things about her absolutely make no sense, but I'm not here to just complain about her. I did extensively test out her best builds, and I will showcase to you her best teams, but at the same time, expect this video to have zero sugarcoating, and so this will be both a critical review and build analysis of Dehya. So let's first talk about her damage potential. The majority of her damage comes from the burst, so the build I'm using here is Emblem Forset and Favonius Greatsword. You could go for Blacklift Slasher as well, but I'll soon reveal to you why energy recharge matters a lot. Also, Dehya's talents are at level 9 and she's Constellation 0. Now, she can deploy her skill in a similar way how Albedo does. If an enemy gets attacked in this field, they will receive a coordinated pyro attack. As you can see, the damage numbers here are abysmal, and it doesn't get better if you vape them or use extremely fine-tuned build. But what about the burst? Well, she goes into this crazy mode and starts unleashing a flurry of fists, each dealing almost 20k damage per hit, with the final ending kick resulting in 27,000 damage. In total, if we also count the burst animation, she will unleash roughly 220,000 damage, and assuming the skill was used before the burst, then the damage slightly goes up to 245,000 or additional 25,000 damage. So, 245k damage in about 7 or 8 seconds. That's pretty good, right? Well, the thing is, what I showed you here was Dehya getting boosted by Benny and Kazuha. This amount of damage with so much boosting is really bad. And sure, you could say, well, you're not vaping her damage, you big dummy. And to that I say, vaping her damage is kinda meh. I tried using Mono with her Omen Mark, and it doesn't last all the way through, and in Abyss, vape was absolutely trashed here for Dehya, at least from my personal experience. But I don't know, I might be missing something here. In fact, the best vape enabler I found for Dehya was Nilou. Her Water Ring almost perfectly lines up and allows you to vape every single Dehya's hit, which, by the way, it results in roughly 6 vaporizes. But come on, using Nilou with Dehya when you could build a top-tier Nilou Bloom team instead? Oh, and before you say, what about Yelan or Xingqiu? Well, I've got bad news for you. Dehya's burst will not trigger their Hydra attacks. But going back to damage, just to give you a reference point, I gave Dehya Lava Walker Forset and her signature weapon. With this, she managed to barely push for 300k damage, only 55,000 damage improvement over her free-to-play build, which by the way has a cracked emblem set. And in fact, I gave her the signature weapon with this emblem set I'm using, and it actually managed to push for 335,000 damage or so. Again, all of this damage was calculated with Benny and Kazuha included, so as you can see, even giving her best in slot weapon or specialized artifacts results in poor damage scaling, mostly because of her low multipliers. All in all, her personal damage, especially if you're not even boosting it, is really bad. If Benny and Kazuha or Sucrose help her out, then it becomes kinda decent, but if you intend to play around her burst damage, I will talk about it more in the next segment. Now, let's take a look at her biggest selling point. So Dehya is marketed as a tank, and basically how it works is that when she places her elemental skill, anyone inside the field who get attacked, including herself, Dehya will mitigate this damage. So at skill talent level 9, 48% of this damage goes to Dehya, while 52% is dealt to the active character. Now, how Dehya takes this mitigated damage is interesting. It will be dealt to her in 10 seconds, so basically, divide the mitigated damage by 10, and each second she gets dealt this amount of damage. Now, there is a limit to how much she can mitigate, and right now it can be up to 200% of her HP, or basically twice the amount of health she has. Now, there is a way how you can further reduce this damage. Thanks to her passive talent, if she redeploys her skill for the next 6 seconds, the incoming damage dealt every second will be reduced by 60%. That's a pretty cool mechanic overall, but it's kind of a bummer because Serpent Spine passive effect will get reduced to 0, because the damage over time she receives counts as a separate instance, so even if once somebody takes damage in the field, and even if she's off field, that damage over time will remove all of her Serpent Spine stacks. It's kinda ironic because if this didn't happen, Serpent Spine would have been her best 4-star option. But moving on, if Dehya ever falls below 40% health, she will instantly recover 20% immediately, and then 30% more over 10 seconds. For world exploration, this is an amazing thing to have, especially since she can also recover when taking fall damage, but in the Abyss, it's not enough, and without a healer, she'll quickly fade away. But yeah, that's a basic overview of Dehya's abilities, and in this next segment, I want to show you some of the more complex things you can do with her when she's in a team. So first of all, I will showcase 3 different roles Dehya can go for, and you can always see the stats and loadout at the bottom of the screen. The first build and team we're looking at would be support Dehya for Melt Ganyu. The best artifact set for this would be 4-piece Tenacity, so that Dehya can allow Ganyu to melt her charge shots and provide the attack buffing from this artifact set. Other option would be Instructor's Forset. But there's a problem. Dehya by herself is not enough for Ganyu to melt her charge shots consistently. I guess the livestream footage we saw was real. Not only will Dehya sometimes hide hijack the reaction, and instead her coordinated pyro attack will melt, but even if things perfectly line up, it's just too slow to keep up with Ganyu's charge shot cryo application. So what's the solution? Well, you'll need to use burning melt comp, or basically you need a dendro unit to cause burning on a target, and then the Coco Goat can melt all of her charge shots with pretty strong consistency. Obviously, the best unit for this job is Nahida, but I did test out Traveler and he also worked pretty well. Although, you will need to keep the target inside both the Travelers and Dehya circles to keep refreshing the burning. Now, the other big thing about Dehya is her ability to provide infinite resistance to interruption. Basically, anybody inside Dehya's skill field will not get interrupted, so you can easily do things like Ganyu's charge shots. However, there is an annoying drawback. This super armor or infinite poise that a character gets only lasts for 9 seconds of the field's 12-second duration. Basically, the last 3 seconds or so, the resistance interruption will become much worse and active units will get interrupted more. But why is that? Well, it's because of her passive. Within the first 9 seconds after using her skill, everybody gains Gold Forge form, and this is the thing that gives infinite resistance to interruption. But since the field lasts 12 seconds, you can imagine the frustration it can cause if you're trying to line up Ganyu's charge shot, and she loses this passive bonus, and now she can get interrupted when she's in the field. Still, Burning Melt Ganyu is a really comfy team comp you can go for, and I especially liked using this team variation. But moving over, the next build I tested was Burst Dehya. The best artifact set for this job I found was Emblem 4 set, followed by Lava Walker and Crimson Witch if you're going for Vape Dehya. The team that I had most success with when using Burst Dehya was Mono Pyro, and it mainly has to do with how extremely energy hungry Dehya is. Like seriously, what was Hoyoverse thinking? And you wanna hear a joke? So Dehya's skill only generates particles from coordinated attacks. She doesn't gain any energy from just deploying the skill. Now, naturally, you're thinking, well, if Dehya goes into her burst mode, she will just keep triggering those coordinated attacks and funnel the particles, right? Nope. She actually removes the skill field when she goes into her burst mode and redeploys it after the burst is done. Essentially, if you use her burst just by herself after using it, she will end up with 0 energy, and by that point, it's better to switch to another character. So she has to build up this energy when she's off field, which is really bad. And so this is where Emblem set comes in. Giving her extra energy recharge, especially in a Mono Pyro team, is super valuable. And this is why I also chose Favonius's Greatsword, because she can at least generate those particles when she's using her burst. By the way, fun fact, if you just use her burst, it will feel super slow and result in a total of 7 hits. However, there is a tiny fine print hidden in the burst description that basically says if you keep mashing your attack or skill button during the burst, she will start ramping up her burst attack speed and result in more hits. I managed to get about 11 hits in total, and doing this is kinda satisfying, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, if you're thinking of going Burst Dehya build, you seriously need to consider her energy recharge needs. I found 150% to 160% in Mono Pyro is enough, but for Vape teams, it will need to be much higher unless you're running a couple of Favonius weapons in the team and funnel the particles to Dehya. Finally, we've got Burgeon. Honestly, it's not the worst thing in the world. I like the fact her highest elemental mastery weapon is Bloodtainted Greatsword, which not only looks great on her, but it's also a 3-star option. So slapping this on her with Gilded Dreams 4 set or the new Flower of Paradise Lost set was good enough to see her trigger Burgeons consistently. The sad part about this is that her skill's coordinated attacks are super slow. It only gets triggered every 2.5 seconds, and compared to Toma, she ends up outputting less damage than him. However, on the bright side, you don't need to build energy recharge on her unlike Toma, since it's just her skill you need to use, and also, Burgeon's self-damage gets mitigated by her. But on the other hand, you need to fight inside the field, the duration of the field is too short, 12 seconds total with 20-second cooldown, so essentially, if you do everything right, assuming Dehya redeploys her skill, this will result in 7 Burgeons in 20 seconds, which is not ideal. But I'm not gonna lie, I was able to easily clear the current abyss using this build, and I actually found it pretty fun to use, especially since everyone would gain that infinite resistance to interruption, so I could unleash stuff without getting interrupted. Also, worst case scenario, if I see some Dendro cores on the ground and Dehya's skill is still on cooldown, I could just use her burst to trigger Burgeon, and you can cancel it early by using jump button. So that's a pretty cool way to do it once in a while. I really wish I could recommend pulling for Dehya because I actually love a lot of things about her, but at the same time, man, what was Hoyoverse thinking? Just off the top of my head when considering the negatives, her damage is average at best, even with high investment. Her damage mitigation, while super interesting, isn't enough to keep the team alive, unlike using shield characters like Zhongli, since everyone still takes damage, and her self-healing is not enough. Also, her pyro application is pretty bad when it comes to speed, because it's super slow. But I personally think the worst offender has to be the resistance to interruption. I really dislike what Hoyoverse did here, and I cannot understand why they just couldn't give this infinite resistance to interruption for the whole duration of her skill. And by the way, her field duration is saved up because she can reposition the skill once, and if she goes into her burst, the field also disappears and reappears after she ends the burst. So technically, if you start with a skill, everyone gains the infinite resistance to interruption for 9 seconds, but then 1 second is spent redeploying, 7 seconds for a full burst duration, and then when the skill comes back on the field, it will remain on the field for 10 or so seconds, but by then, the passive effect of Goldforge form will have worn off. And to add insult to injury, just like with Zhongli before he got buffed, Dehya can get interrupted when she's trying to deploy her skill, so it can be super annoying when you want resistance to interruption, but you first get interrupted when trying to get it. Now, on the bright side, her burst feels really good to use. I love the idea of mindlessly mashing the skill or attack button to ramp up the speed, and I haven't mentioned this yet, but she does gain infinite resistance to interruption when using the burst, so it's good at least she by herself does not need to depend on the skill and passive to not get interrupted. And while I listed this as a negative, I also believe that slow pyro application from off-field does have a place in the game, but we just haven't seen yet a good way to utilize it, I guess. Speaking of which, I know there's rumors going around that perhaps Dehya will get saved with a new artifact set, or maybe she's going to be broken in Fontaine, just like it was first with Cookie and we had to wait for a new region. However, this is a 5-star character that's also going on a standard banner. If this is her first and last time to be on a featured banner, which by the way sucks, then hoping to get her when she's good from losing a 50-50 is kinda a bad idea. Like, characters who go on standard banner usually don't get their own featured banners anymore, so I'm not sure how I would feel about improved Dehya if people choose not to get her now. Either way, if you're somebody who cares about the meta and have trouble clearing the Abyss, you should just save up your Primo Gems. But if you don't care about the Abyss, or you can already clear it easily, like, hey, I showed Mono Pyro Dehya a few moments ago, but I could also clear the same way with Xinyan, so yeah, if that doesn't bother you, and you just think she looks cool and you want to have her, go for it. There's no need to feel bad about it. In fact, if you're watching this video, please don't be one of those people in co-op when a person shows up with Dehya and you harass them. Just because she's not that great doesn't mean you have to be a piece of crap to people. Remember, this is a casual game, and even if I'm min-maxing here with Dehya, having decency is more important than having a meta character. But regardless, Dehya is pretty average right now. I'm not sure if the future will save her or will she remain this way, and I really hope Hoyoverse considers buffing her. If not her core mechanics, then at least improve her damage multipliers, so people can go have fun with Vaporized Dehya build. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I would really appreciate if you could press the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Oh yeah, the actual reason why you should pull for Dehya would be the 10% increased run speed she gives during daytime.